Whether you're talking about Lunar Princess Ranni and her Dark Moon, Miquella the Unalloyed with his Halig Tree and unknown plans in the Land of Shadow, or even our very own Tarnished of No Renown, Elden Ring is filled with individuals trying to shape the future of the Lands Between. But through an act of sheer power, one man threatens to put a stop to it all, arresting the very stars in the sky and bringing fate itself to a standstill. I welcome you, Tarnished, to join this humble scholar as we discuss how Starscourge Radahn achieved this epic feat, and consider what his true goal may have been. Born of a union between Queen Rennala of the Full Moon and Radahn of the Golden Order, Radahn is brother to Ranni and Rykard. But despite this familial relationship, these siblings' ambitions couldn't be more different. Whereas Ranni sought strength in her Dark Moon, and Rykard in the blasphemous arts of times past, Radahn took a different path, shaped by his childhood adoration for both his father, Radahn, and the Elden Lord, Godfrey. We know, for example, that Radahn was proud of his red hair, with one of his monikers being the Red Lion General. And as his helmet states, Radahn inherited the furious flaming red hair of his father, Radahn, and is fond of its heroic implications. And this pride is also further evidenced by the name of Radahn's army of highly skilled and loyal soldiers, the Redmanes, some of which bear plumes of red hair on their helmets, emulating their beloved general. Radahn's admiration for Godfrey, meanwhile, is evidenced by his armor set, which is adorned with golden lions said to symbolize Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, and his beast regent, Sarash. From his youngest years, Radahn was naturally captivated by the Lord of the Battlefield. I was born a champion's cub. Now I am the Lord of the Battlefield's lion. But Radahn's path to gaining strength was all his own. Rather than relying on sheer physical force alone, Radahn also became a master of powerful gravitational magic, apparently motivated by his desire to keep his scrawny steed, Leonard, at his side. Big shout out to Zuli the Witch for this discovery that never fails to make me smile. Radahn is said to have trained these arts in Celia Town of Sorcery, under the guidance of an Alabaster Lord, a mysterious race of beings that we'll discuss in a bit more detail later. For now though, you need only know that Radahn used his mastery over gravity to conquer the stars, resulting in them being held in stasis. This scene is immortalized on the Starscourge Talisman, which is said to depict a hero's tale of how the mightiest hero of the demigods confronted the falling stars alone, and thus did he crush them, his conquest sealing the very fate of the stars. And this action seems to have not only put Ranni's fate on hold, but perhaps also the fate of Erdtree adherents as well. For, as we learned from Muriel, when Radahn and Rennala wed, the order of the Erdtree and the fate of the moon were conjoined. Maybe that's why Radahn has to die in order for us to access the DLC. His actions go beyond just the fate of the Carians and Ranni. But why did Radahn confront the stars to begin with? Well, there are two prominent theories that have been floating around the community for a while now, both of which were summarized nicely by Vati in his Demigods video. I'll touch on these two theories briefly just to make sure everyone's up to speed, before introducing a newer third theory that I like a lot more and I think makes too much sense not to share. So the first theory is that Radahn was deliberately attempting to interfere with Ranni's plans, perhaps on behalf of the Golden Order and the Greater Will. We of course end up learning that Ranni's endgame involves appending the Golden Order entirely, so perhaps they somehow got wind of this and wanted to stop her. And what better way to do that than to freeze her fate? As evidence for this theory, we have the description of the telescope that states, "During the age of the Erdtree, Carian astrology withered on the vine. The fate once writ in the night skies had been fettered by the Golden Order." this does potentially imply that the Golden Order had some hand in Radahn's actions. And when you combine that with his veneration of Godfrey and Radahn, it's possible that Radahn might have helped stand in Ranni's way, if asked. However, I do think it's worth pointing out that according to his greatsword, Radahn earned his nickname Star Scourge during his youth, which means he had likely already stopped the stars before Ranni's plans were known to anyone. Others suggest that perhaps Radahn was motivated to stop Ranni by resentment that he felt towards her for being chosen as an Empyrean by the Fingers, and thus given a pathway to the kind of glory and recognition that he hoped to one day achieve for himself. However, I haven't seen much evidence for this, and if anything there is some evidence to the contrary. We for example find a portrait of Radahn hanging in the Volcano Manor, suggesting that he and Rykard probably aren't on the worst of terms. And since we know that Ranni felt close enough to Rykard to entrust him with a shard of the Rune of Death during the Black Knives plot, it seems safe to infer that there wasn't much dissension among the Carian siblings. The second common theory for Radahn sealing the stars is that he did so to prevent something from falling into the lands between. Specifically, there's evidence that he wanted to defend the place he trained as a youth, Sellia, from some sort of impending cosmic threat. A sword monument in Caelid seems to memorialize this, stating, "The Star Scourge conflict. Radahn alone holds Sellia secure and stands tall to shatter the stars." But what was Radahn trying to protect Sellia from? Well, as we learn from a bit of dialogue from Gowry, the Sellians are descended from the Eternal, a line that most interpret as meaning their ancestors likely came from the now underground Eternal Cities, Nokron Nokstella, and the Nameless Eternal City. I talk a bit more about the relationship between Sellia and the Eternal Cities in this video in the card, so feel free to check it out if it sounds interesting. Now, we know that at least one of the Eternal Cities met a ruinous fate at the hands of an extraterrestrial creature called Astel, natural born of the Void. Astel is described as a malformed star, born in the lightless void far away that once destroyed an Eternal City and took away their sky. So considering that Radahn trained in Sellia, it seems pretty plausible that he would have heard tales of the Armageddon faced by one of the Eternal Cities. And so the theory goes that he sealed the stars in the sky as a defensive measure to prevent Sellia from facing a similar disaster. But to be honest, neither of these theories has ever fully grabbed me. Sure, Radahn idolized Radahn and Godfrey, but to my knowledge, he isn't ever explicitly described as an ally of the Golden Order. It's possible, but in my opinion it doesn't seem to mesh well with his character. And to me at least, it also seems hard to imagine that someone so obsessed with conquest and glory, and who by all accounts earned the loyalty and respect of those around him, would be motivated out of petty spite or jealousy towards Ranni. As for the second theory, that Radahn acted purely in defense of Sellia, that certainly fits the bill a bit better. But it still puts Radahn in a defensive position, someone who's simply reacting to the events happening around them, rather than trying to shape them. And so this brings us to a third theory that was recently articulated by Reddit user BlaiddFailcam, in a great thread that I'll link in the video description. The theory goes like this. What if instead of simply trying to defend against impending threats, Radahn was purposely pulling these cosmic monsters towards the lands between so that he could destroy them? Remember, throughout the game, Radahn is described as challenging, confronting, and conquering the stars. While these words could technically refer to defense, offense seems a bit more fitting. And I also want to throw out there that although his English name, Star Scourge, is kinda ambiguous, his Japanese name, Hoshikudaki, is quite clear, directly translating to Star Smasher, or Shatterer. And so the theory here is that upon hearing in Sellia about creatures that existed in space powerful enough to level entire cities, Radahn said,
"Challenge accepted,"
and sought to call down the stars and defeat them as a way to prove his strength and to earn a hero's glory that could rival his idols. Aside from this just feeling like a much more Radahn interpretation, there's actually evidence that we can use in-game to support this theory. For one thing, as BlaiddFailcam points out, The special skill on Radahn's weapon, the Star Scourge Greatsword, is literally called Star Caller's Cry, a technique which involves roaring into the night sky and pulling enemies in with a gravitational wave before smashing them down. And I can also confirm that the skill name is an accurate translation of the Japanese name, which is Hoshiyobi, literally Star Caller. And so Star Caller's Cry in both name and effect perfectly fits with the idea that Radahn wanted to pull in the stars and crush them, rather than simply trying to stop them from falling down. And this ability to pull things in with gravity brings us back to Radahn's teachers, the Alabaster Lords. These beings unfortunately aren't given much backstory, but what is here is quite interesting and relevant to our argument. The Alabaster Lord's sword describes them as a race of ancients with skin of stone who were said to have risen to life when a meteor struck long ago. Interestingly, this origin actually isn't unique in Elden Ring, as it's shared by a related race called the Onyx Lords, whose description is pretty much identical, but there are some key differences here to tease apart. For one thing, there seems to be a deliberate duality being represented by their names. Alabaster being a type of white stone, while onyx is of course a kind of black stone, black and white. But this dichotomy actually extends even further, since although they're both wielders of gravitational magic, their spells seem to represent opposite polarities. The gravity spells of the Alabaster Lords almost exclusively involve pulling things in and attraction, while Onyx Lord spells are all about pushing things away and repulsion. With this in mind, we can perhaps interpret this line from Radahn to his Alabaster Lord Master in a slightly different light than we might otherwise.
I thank you for your tutelage. For now I can challenge the stars.
Radahn isn't just thanking his master for teaching him gravitational magic generally, but rather for equipping him with the techniques he needs to pull in the enemies he wants to challenge himself against. Perhaps a young Radahn even specifically sought an Alabaster Lord as opposed to an Onyx Lord, in order to one day achieve this goal. And so, although Radahn's actions had the repercussion of stopping Ranni's fate and of saving Celia, his motive was perhaps more simple. He just wanted to call in the baddest foe he could find and go toe-to-toe with it, just to prove himself and earn a hero's glory and honor. And in my opinion, that seems like a very Radahn thing to do. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with this theory? Do you think that maybe the other theories seem more plausible? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. In any case, I'm excited to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. It really helps out my small channel a lot, and I genuinely appreciate it. And hey, I'd also appreciate it if you considered supporting me on Patreon, by becoming a YouTube member, or by buying me a coffee. Thanks a ton for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.